Hey guys, I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. I'm really excited today because I've got a product to share with you that is very interesting. It's a indoor composter by the Luma company. And indoor composters are kind of a newer sort of device that you can bring indoors, and it makes really quick compost. Say in about 24 hours you got something that you can put in your pots as a little bit of a compost fertilizer. So today we're going to go through and talk about it. I'm going to open it from the box. We're going to go through putting it together. If there is stuff to put together, I haven't even opened it yet. So we'll see how it goes. And they did send it to me to try and keep and test out. But I can assure you I'm going to give you my open and honest opinion about everything. The good, the bad, the ugly, all that kind of stuff about this composter. So here we go. Hey everybody, Future Dave here. I'm interrupting this original video here so that I can tell you that at the end I've spent 5 weeks or so going through and making compost from the Luma composter, and I want to show you what those results are here at the end of the video. But until then, watch the whole process. I've got some important information to share for you about it. So some of the features are right here on the box. It talks about the waste reduction by up to 90%. It's portable. You can move it around your countertop if you want to, or move it somewhere else. If you want to keep it in the garage, you could do it there. Food waste to fertilizer in 3 to 6 hours. So you put your compost in for the day, and the next day you've got something. Easily, you could do it overnight while you're sleeping. And then it's 2.5 liter capacity, and it has a filter in it to help avoid any of the smells, because we all know composting does produce a few odors here and there if you've done it outdoors in any kind of way. So let's take a look. All right, we get some instructions, which we'll read after we do everything else first. That's typically how I do things. A little bit of packing material. Looks pretty nice so far, black in color. It's got a lid that goes over the little compost area. Some information on what not to put in your compost bin, and things like large bones, hardwood, cooking oil, candy gum, hard fruit cores. They show like a little picture of an avocado, so the avocado cores probably shouldn't go in there. Hard fruit shells, metals, synthetic fibers, and plastic. So those are good ideas anyway. Only in small amounts. They say whole corn, fibrous produce, napkins, natural fabrics, starch, rich fruit, sauces and jams, butters and spreads, and honey, just in small amounts. And waste categories that are allowed: your typical fruits, vegetables, but they do allow meat scraps to go in there. Shellfish, dairy, seeds and nuts, fish bones, legumes, coffee grounds, tea bags, eggshells, weeds, and foliage. So those, you've got a nice handy thing there. If you're in doubt, this is probably a good thing to keep in a drawer on your countertop, under your countertop somewhere nearby your composter, so that you can reference it if you ever just forget what you're supposed to be able to put in there. All right, and here they've got a container. I may actually have to read instructions because I'm not sure what this is. Inside, we've got a pretty substantial looking metal bucket, and in there you can see it's got some sort of a rotating paddle there, and then a blade that it kind of goes up on the inside up against. So this will be where you put all your compost and scraps, and when you get your compost out, and it's all said and done. So, and this seems to only go in one direction into the container. Up here, it's got some controls. I don't have it plugged in yet, so it doesn't really show what these are doing. I'll have to plug that in to show you, but it's got drying, grinding, and cooling. So that's probably telling you the different cycles that it's in. Looks like it has a lock on it so that the top can be locked in place, because you wouldn't want somebody to accidentally open up your compost and make a big mess somewhere. Okay, this is the filter, and to get it installed, we pretty much just take off this plastic piece that covers it. I guess that keeps the carbon filter stuff from going every which way. You can see a little bit came out on that. And this basically is just going to help keep things smelling decent. And on the side here, let me readjust my camera. Going down to right there. And spot where it goes into, so we'll take off this tape. Open this up, and then there's another film to remove. And it looks like there is a carbon filter already in there, so it comes with two. So we've got one and a spare. I probably should have waited on taking the seal off of one of these. In fact, I'll see if I can get that back on there so I can keep it a little bit longer. So we'll slide that in, and we'll cover it back up. So it's very cool that it comes with two carbon filters. I covered up the other one and we'll just save it for later. We are set up and ready to go. I'm going to move this to another location where it's not on the kitchen table, and then we can test it. We'll start putting some stuff in here and we'll see how it works. All right, so I'm taking some coffee grounds right here, and I've already thrown a few little things into this composter, and we'll take a look right in there. You can see I've got an old head of lettuce, paper towel. It's got a few things that are vegetable related in there, just some simple stuff that normally I'd be throwing into a regular old compost bin. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll put the lid on this thing, turn it. It's in the locking position. Uh-oh, it's already starting. That's interesting. So now it's going through what looks like a drying cycle to start with, and we will just wait and see. We'll come back and check it in a little while and see what it's doing. All right, so here is the compost. We've actually added a little bit more to it than I initially did, but you can see kind of how it's all broken down inside. The interior has got this container that you can pop out with a handle, which will do that, and that's what we have. So I'm going to dump this out into another container, and so you can kind of see it a little bit better. All right, so I'm going to take this compost and dump it into this container so you can see what we got. And it's pretty finely broken down. You do see some little specks of some things in here. I'm not sure what that was, but some sort of vegetable matter. We had coffee grounds, tea, bags in here. We had some pieces of cut up vegetables, peppers, onions. That's probably what those little leaves there are, like onion skin that didn't fully get composted, but that's okay. It will continue to break down. Now this would not necessarily be compost. This would be finely chopped up and dried organic matter. But this would be great to put into compost or to put into your plants to add some organic material to them. And the microbes would continue to work on those afterward and help feed and nourish your plants. The interior of the chamber came pretty clean. There's a little bit here I can probably knock out into this. But overall, not bad. There's not much else I need to do. I'm going to take this back inside and probably start some more compost that we have left over. Pretty much every day you've got something else that you can throw in here, whether it be coffee grounds, banana peels, vegetable scraps, all kinds of stuff is good to go into these containers. So we're going to take some of this compost that we've made and we're going to sprinkle it in here in this pepper plant that I transplanted recently from the vegetable garden. My goal with the pepper plant is to have some peppers that I can grow indoors over the winter and then in the spring be able to plant outside. Right now I've got some pretty nice looking peppers that are forming on this. These are jalapenos, and I do hope that maybe during the winter I'll get a couple here and there just to enjoy, but the main purpose again is to put it in the garden next spring. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of mix around the top layer of soil, and then we're going to give it a good watering. So we'll see how this does as an additive or a fertilizer for these plants, this compost. Probably in another week or so, I'm going to start bringing this indoors. We got down to 47 degrees this morning, and those temperatures are starting to drop. Usually we'll start getting frost sometime after October 15th. So I've got a few more days to keep this outside, and then I'll start bringing it back indoors. Another thing you could do with this kind of compost is put it into some sort of a cheesecloth and make sort of a compost tea out of it. Just soak it in a 5-gallon bucket of water for a couple days and then start using it to water your plants. All right, so we've got a second batch of this that we did, and this is what is left over from bananas and coffee grounds. That's kind of a mixture of that. So let's pull this out and take a look so you can see a little better. All right, so here's what we got. Now you can tell there's some fibers in here that predominantly came from the bananas, I think. But it's kind of this blackish, brownish, fluffy, light substance here. Now this would probably be excellent for putting around rose bushes. So that's what I'm going to do. So this is a rose bush that we planted a little while ago. It's one I got my wife for our anniversary. And I'm just going to sprinkle some of this around the base. Not directly over top of the root ball. I want the roots to be stretching out to get the nutrition. I don't want them to be becoming confined into their places. So we'll do that, and then we'll give it a little bit of a watering and let it work its way into the soil. So the Luma Composter is a neat device that really does a good job of breaking down those food particles into finely ground materials that are going to be easier for the bacteria and the microbes that are in the soil to continue to break down even further. Look forward to seeing how it works on our potted plants and seeing how beneficial this is. It should speed along the composting process and allow the transfer of those nutrients a lot faster than typical compost does. Some things about the composter just to take note of. It did not make a lot of noise. It had a low-grade grinding sound, kind of background noise, and it wasn't very loud to go throughout the house. So if you're concerned about the noise, that's really not a big deal. Now you might be concerned about odor on these. It's got a filter pack that goes in it, so the scent does get filtered through it. There was still some fragrance that came from the composter. I used a lot of coffee grounds in each of these, in which case coffee does have a strong scent, and so you could really smell that coffee. But once it was all finished composting and things were dried out, you didn't notice any kind of a real odor to it. There's a very faint odor when you smell the compost, as it should be, because it's made of materials that are going to be composting. Now over the last few weeks, I have been using this composter on a pretty much daily basis. I've been putting whatever food scraps we have in, coffee grounds, sometimes there's some paper towels that get mixed up in it. Nothing that you couldn't ordinarily put into a compost bin. And I wanted to show you what the result of this is. I've got this container of cat litter. It's not cat litter anymore, but it's an empty washed out container that's half full of compost stuff. Check that out. Now it's pretty finely broken up. It's like a little bit of a fluffy powder almost. Some of that might just be due to the fibrous nature of certain things that went in there. We did everything from some eggshells to scraps, vegetable scraps. We had, what else? Paper towels went in there. We had some coffee grounds, a lot of coffee filters, a lot of tea went in here. So there's a lot of stuff that got all mixed up in here. And so just want to kind of show you what it looks like, just like this. It is a pretty finely ground powder. It is definitely much more broken up than you would normally put compost into a compost bin. Now, here's what I've learned from this whole process here. I actually used some of this into a planter. I put it on the top, it kind of mixed in the top layer of soil, and then it started to get a little bit of a mold on it. which is a very good clue because it kind of reveals something that I was thinking, that this is really just finely ground up food scraps that are just in really finely, ground particles. And it's not really compost, at least not yet, but it is a good deal further along on the way than it would have been if I had just tossed it into a compost bin. Because what happens is you break up the compost into tiny little particles, and then those microbes that break down the compost even further are actually going to have more surface area to eat what they want to eat, and then they'll turn into compost hopefully a lot faster. But it dries it out, and so it stays into this powder form. And so there's a couple options you can do with it once you've gotten to this point. And let me pull some of this out just so you can see it a little differently on camera. But here's kind of what it has turned into to this stage. You can see there's still some stringy things left. That's probably from tea bags that had little twine on them. But what you can do next, there's a few things. One, you can throw it directly in a compost bin. Let it further break down and help contribute to speeding up your compost process. You could mix it into the bottom layer of, say, a lasagna garden bed, or layer it back and forth with other materials, because what you've got here is probably a pretty good brown material. It has some coffee grounds in it. It has a pretty good balance of stuff, I would guess. Or, if you do worm composting, that would be an excellent way to go with this kind of material. Put this into a container and then start adding some paper products into it to give the worms something to use. So there's a lot of options for this, but I do want to be clear that this is not yet actual compost that I would recommend putting in the vegetable garden. It is a whole lot further on the way. I think it's really a cool idea because it gets it so much further along the way for your compost to go. But it isn't true compost, not yet, but you're only one little step away. So is the product worth it? It's going to depend on you, what you think. If you are in a small apartment or a small place that you could use this compost and then further compost it into a small worm bin or something, it could be a great idea. If you are using a large composter already, it may not be necessary for you. And in this case, it is kind of cool to break it up and just have a convenient, easy place for me to put the compost each day and have it turn into something like this. But I'm curious to see how this helps in my compost bins, which I put together just a few days ago. I did some pallet compost bins that I'm going to start using fairly regularly. I use a combination of wood chips and leaves and kitchen waste product stuff. So overall, I think it's cool. I think it's good. I'm not sure this is for everybody, and I think there are lots of different ways that you can compost that may work out just as good, but this does do a very good job of breaking things up into very, very small little bits here that can really speed along your composting process. So I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. If this review was helpful to you, hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Growing the Home Garden. Thanks for watching.